This is Gavort. Hi, I'm Jake. Sorry, I've been sick, so hopefully I sound okay, and hopefully I make some sense this morning. Here to talk to you about the state of the GitHub. They asked me to give a presentation on new GitHub features, and there are a lot of them. The state of the GitHub, I gave this presentation, the last time was in 2014, where we were keeping track of how many folks were using GitHub. We've pretty much grown by a factor of 3 in just about every metric. Like the active users are now about 4,000. You can see the repositories, they're about over 1,000 organizations using just shy of 1.2 terabytes of data. And the number of repositories, we don't know. I usually go to the admin panel and run a query on how many repos we have, and it crashes. So we're guessing, based on scale, it's about 35,000 active repositories right now. So many of you use GitHub already, and you apparently like it a lot. It got officially taken over by IT hosting services and has been for the past few years now. Your executive team is Jen Shepard and Doug Finley, and the Kamal Badur, who would be writer-director and probably key grip. They make updates pretty seamless, and this is your team to thank. Thank you guys so much for making all of this possible. Some of these folks are here today. And this list is just from people who are actively working on the project. Got this from culling through the HipChat archives for the group for the channel where people actually do the updates. And these are the supporting cast members that aren't in the platforms team but are helping out. So how well is this going? It's going pretty well. You may have noticed or not noticed, because upgrades have been pretty seamless. There have been 5 major feature updates in the past year. A couple of those updates have been near zero downtime or zero downtime. So features tend to sneak in. Security concerns make us upgrade. At times we don't plan to. We generally plan to at times when the students aren't around, because students are using the system. Like I said, they asked me to compile some list of features for this. Compiling that list of features made me nearly go blind. There were about 30 pages of just bullet points of features that sneak into the UI over time. So there are too many things to cover right now. So I made a Z-link of just the highlights, and you can go to just the highlights, and there are links for documentation for all those highlights. And that's down in the corner. But they basically break down into categories. I think the most interesting one for y'all will be pull requests, but there are major changes to how Kanban boards work. You may not know about Kanban boards or may use them. Basically, some stuff about how repositories are managed and how organizations and teams get managed, and that one's the most interesting one to me. Cool. So along the lines of the pull request capabilities, you can now make pull request templates, which you could do in github.com for a long time, but you can add a bunch of template code that allows somebody, when they're making a template, to go through a checklist or check some stuff before they submit their pull request. You can have multiple pull request templates that you control and suggest to people, as well as doing hooks on those pull requests. And that's configured in the .github directory of a repo, if you have that repo. When you're making a pull request, you can now compare across forks in case different teams are working on the same project and working on similar feature requests. You can request pull requests. If you're managing the project, you can request the pull requests go through multiple reviews. You can also demand that it passes CI inspection and other things, and that's in the project control panel. If you're reviewing a pull request, there's some nice features. You can drag and drop. You may not have noticed, you can drag and drop a number of kinds of files to the comments, and they're understood. So PowerPoint, Excel, text, PDFs, log files, and doc files. And there's a smart compare feature between the two. So like if it's in the repo and these two things are happening in a pull request, you'll get a smart compare window between the two. There's a little UI thing for show me the differences in a PDF, and it seems to work pretty well. It's also true for Markdown. As an image, there's an image diff tool with a slider between the two, and you can now drag and drop zip files for collections, and it archives them as large objects. And it keeps history for all of the comments on a pull request. When you're looking at a pull request to, in the upper left-hand corner, you might have noticed a jump to, which will jump to files along the pull request. For these kinds of files that it knows about, including and add to that Go, JavaScript, TS, Python, PHP, and Ruby files, you can jump to methods and structured elements inside those types of code, which allow you to jump and see what changes happen to a particular JavaScript library or something like that. Commands. Now, all these commands add comment history to the pull request, so you can go back in time and see what the history of the pull request comments are. Tabbing and reverse tabbing works in a bunch of editors, which allows you to move back and forth between the layers of commenting. And you can have multiple pull request issue templates as well as pull request templates. It works basically the same as the pull request templates. You have some new merge options for rebase and merge. You can directly do conflict resolution in the UI. There's a button for it if you have conflicts. It's hiding. It's along the right-hand side. You can also see all checks that are required by the pull request in the right-hand side, and that'll tell you how successful you're likely to be with the pull request before you hit the Go button. New feature, a lot of in the past few years are boards, and this is a kind of a Trello-like solution. Milestones existed before where you could tag up issues for your team to tackle in, say, like a sprint or something like that. What wasn't possible before was to prioritize a backlog, because there was no sense of order to a milestone, just a sense of tags and urgency. So a lot of commit work has been done on boards. Now boards have automation, and there are kinds of boards you can select. So at the top of your project, you might see a little tab for boards. You can create a basic Kanban board, an automated Kanban board, or a bug triage template, and it'll automate these types of processes. Like new bugs will go into a bug triage board, and as somebody comments, they can move towards that's done right now. Yeah. You can add notes to the boards as well as issues, and they're also referred to as cards, and they can refer to other repositories that aren't issues in this organization or other repositories in the organization. So you can at a high level point to requirements that are in other projects that you depend on. You can now archive both notes and issues and pull them back from archive if that's something that helps you. You can, from the issues, from a new issue, if you're editing it, you can add or remove it to a board. You can move cards with some shortcuts. Those are in the notes. You can directly move cards. Many of you know you can close an issue with fix pound. This automation moves cards in both milestones and boards, so it'll move it to the done column and notify people of it. You can now edit the labels, which is kind of visually useful up there. And if you have any kind of checklist in the description, there's a progress bar for the overall board, which tells you how far you're along in the sprint. And there can be progress bars on each one of the cards to tell you how far the team's gotten on an individual item. There's also a full screen button in the upper right-hand corner. There's a bunch of real estate that gets taken up by, in not just the board's view, other views, by this is the repo, these are the people working on it. But you'll notice in a lot of the UI elements, there's now full screen button in the upper right-hand corner, and that lets you focus in on the board or the issue that you're working on. Let's see. Organizations can now have boards too, so you can roll up a bunch of different milestones or projects and prioritize them for your organization and keep track of how far along those milestones are for a piece of software and another piece of software and another effort that you work on that are in the same org but in different projects. And all this stuff applies to the organization boards as well. Yeah, and they have configurable permissions, but you can check that out. You can configure who can modify organizational boards based on the team structure. Repositories. You can now tag things with topics. You might have seen that. Topics are now searchable, and you can search topics from a number of places in the UI. Like overall, I want to search for projects that are Ansible. I want projects that are related to CI, and it'll search all through GitHub and give you a nice little interface for things that might help you out if you're interested in that kind of thing. Generally, language can be searched as a topic as well, but indexing is interesting. Let's see. Repositories can now be archived and unarchived. You can archive a repository to freeze its state so commits don't happen. That's been possible for a while. You can now bring it back to life. But the archiving a repo also freezes its issues so they don't show up in your automation. So if you've got like a bunch of things telling Slack or HipChat, they'll be quieter when you archive a topic, and CI won't run on them. Administrators can override the suggested protocol for cloning. That's a pretty geeky thing, but that's helpful for some automations. Branch protection rules for repositories. Go open it up in settings. There are a lot of options you have right now, and they're new. They've been creeping into releases, especially over the past year. They're in the notes, but you can protect a branch. You can require that 2 pull request reviewers review a pull request, or CI has to run before I'll trigger the next automation process. There are a lot of options there. And wikis, you can control those with pull requests now too, though that's hiding, and then you have to check it out, and then there are some special instructions for how to do that. Teams. Teams is pretty. The changes in teams are a little bit smaller, but they're the most exciting to me. Teams can now be nested, so you can have a team that's responsible for the overall project, and team code members and UI members, and whatever structure really works for your collaboration. And the fact that they're nested, they can have parent teams, means you can set a base set of permissions for a ton of people, and then a smaller set of permissions or a larger set of permissions for people who fall into subcategories or non-people like automation users. And it's a lot easier to, for me at least, to manage those teams. You can have team conversations now. There's a team status page where you can start a conversation just with the team or the organization and set visibility and all that, and that's outside of all of the repositories. So you can sort of discuss things, and then you can pin those conversations, and then you can reference those pins from issues, comments, or any of your documentation or wikis. So you can play around with it. It's been useful here. Visibility for teams has finer grained controls. You can see the permissions for that stuff. You can now upload a team avatar, which is kind of cool. And the team view has a heat map and quick permissions configuration. So like if you want to change how your repos are, if you want to change access things for your repos, doing it in the team page is a little bit easier. You get a little button with a drag down and some help. So I kept a question slide. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much. Yes, sir.
Have you heard anything about enterprise GitHub getting access to apps?
Yes. Yeah, so the question is, does Enterprise GitHub get access to apps? We're on 2.14 right now. We have access to apps some access to apps in 2.14, but we have, there's a lot more apps functionality that's snuck into 2.15. We have to turn it on. And God, that can be driven by, you can drive apps a couple of different ways. One of them is with Docker repos. We'd have to turn that on in the administration console, which I imagine we would want to do because apps are super cool. I did put a couple notes about apps in the notes. So yeah, coming soon probably, and maybe more coming soon. One thing I didn't cover was if some of you may have heard, GitHub got acquired by Microsoft in June of this year. It caused some angst amongst folks. I remember it was June of this year because a few days after it happened, there was a blog post on my birthday that changed the pricing structure, which we still have to talk about, because it went from, hey, we get a really good deal on GitHub Enterprise if we run it on-prem, to, hey, your really good deal is completely free if you run it on-prem or in the cloud or at HA. And you also get this bunch of other stuff. So I'm not sure how to change our contract from we pay you a little bit of money to we pay nothing and figure out how to get other education materials out there. So we still have to work that out. Point being, if we run in the cloud, apps are just there, and all of that functionality for enterprise in the cloud is already what you'd expect in GitHub.com, and also you can do your own container management stuff. So it's really powerful if we go that way.
Great. Well, we are just a little over on time for your presentation, so it was a good question, though. I bet many in the audience were curious about that.